Welcome to today's webinar, Powering Up Your EV Fleet, 3 Ways to Optimize Your Charging Infrastructure, presented by ChargePoint and Apollo SunGard. I'm Christy Grimes, Associate Editor for Government Fleet, and I will be your moderator for today's event. I encourage you to ask questions during the webinar at any point, and we will try to address them all. But if we don't get to them, we will contact you via email with a response to the question. So let's go ahead and meet today's presenters. Our presenters are Matt Bianco, President of Fedway Consulting, LLC, Kayla Pitts, Federal Account Executive at ChargePoint, and Shelby Wright, EV Charging Stations Lead at Apollo SunGard. Thank you guys so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
So let's go ahead and look at a list of what we'll be covering today. We will be covering the current and future forward landscape for the EV charging infrastructure market, government requirements and their impact on your EV charging strategy, 3 ways to optimize and future-proof your charging infrastructure rollout, and where to start and what to consider when planning for EV charging. So I will go ahead and toss it to you guys to get started.
Great. Well, I'm going to start with an introduction of myself, and then Kayla, I can pass it to you to introduce yourself, and then maybe you can just talk a little bit about ChargePoint. So just by way of introduction, my name is Matt Bianco. As Christy mentioned, President of Fedway Consulting. I did work for ChargePoint for 5 years, from 2014 to about 2019. I handled all the federal accounts for ChargePoint and have learned a lot from my years in EV charging. I started off in the software world. I've been doing federal work for about 20 years now. Started in the software world, went to cybersecurity, and then in 2014 landed in EV charging. And they've all come together because these network charging stations have software and hardware, and then the cyber thoughts. I've done some podcasts around that as well. So yeah, so that's me in a nutshell. I've worked with over 100 federal agencies, civilian, DoD, intelligence agencies, and getting EV infrastructure in place. And I always treat it as concept to completion. So what you'll see throughout this webinar is sort of the things that you need to think about when you're getting into this, and then the things that you need to think of while you're implementing, and then after the fact, the maintenance and keeping those stations up and running and that type of thing. So we'll talk a lot about that. But Kayla, I'll pass it to you for an introduction, and then we can dig in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kayla Pitts. I'm the Federal Account Executive here at ChargePoint. I've been with the company going on a year now. September will be a year. Prior to ChargePoint, I worked in federal sales for Bluebird Corporation, a school bus manufacturer. So excited to be here with you all today. I think we can go to that next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about ChargePoint and the future of EVs. All right, so ChargePoint was actually founded in 2007 in Silicon Valley. We are on the New York Stock Exchange as a public company, and we have roughly 1,800 employees worldwide. We're in the US, Europe, and from a charging port perspective, we have roughly 275,000 activated charge ports across the world currently, with 350,000 of those ports accessible via roaming agreements. So we really are the unrivaled network. We're the #1 brand in North America with a market share of roughly 70% of all stations in the United States.
Yeah, and Kayla, I'll add, just to the slide beyond ChargePoint, it talks about the future being now and the EV growth and things like that. And Christy, of course, chime in if you would like. But I just got off the phone with a military guy that's leading a lot of really big efforts from a military rollout of charging stations, and we had a conversation where it's just such a learning curve right now. There's a lot of fear, range anxiety. How does it hold up in cold? Are the batteries big enough? How long does it take to charge from 0 to 100%? Because we're all used to just hitting the gas station when our gas light goes on. So it's just a change in behavior. And the way that plays into those figures of the EV growth is, I just read a stat. I think it was in an article on LinkedIn that I happened to notice it, was that 10% of new purchases were EVs this year in the United States, or plug-ins. And I was really surprised at that. I actually felt like that was much, much higher than I would have ever expected. So all the manufacturers are going this way. You've got all these trucks and the Silverado, the Ram, the Ford Lightning, all of them are going electric. You've got the fun Cybertruck coming out. You've got Rivian, you've got Lucid, you've got even Hyundai and Ford and all these manufacturers going all electric. Volkswagen is another that's announced they're going fully electric, in just a handful of years. I look at the years and I see 2023 and I'm thinking, you hear numbers for like the federal fleet at 2027 that we'll get into in one of the future slides. That's not that far away, so we've got some big goals. The manufacturers are sending us that way. It's going to be to a point where we don't really have options. So even if someone is not necessarily an EV believer, the options are going to be limited out there. So that EV growth is significant. A lot of people, people I would never expect are starting to look at EVs. So it's exciting to see. And then at the bottom section of that slide, you'll see obviously all the effect on the environment. But, I talk to people that, don't necessarily worry about the environment as much as maybe I do and Kayla does and the others on this call. But you take away the greenhouse gas savings and all that we can do for the environment. We're seeing all these wildfires. We're seeing, hurricanes in San Diego, and we're seeing, frozen temperatures in Texas, and, all these crazy things with the climate. But take away that, you look at just the ownership of an EV. I've been an EV driver for 7 years now. I think I, get the most frustrated as I ever was to go to a shop to, whether it's to get the registration updated, or, maybe I need new tires or new brake pads or something, but there's just very little maintenance on these products, these EVs. And it's just such a better user experience. So, I when I see greenhouse gas and I see, that type of thing, I think that one to the bullet to the right there, lower fuel maintenance costs, I think that's a huge thing, especially for fleet owners, or managers, because you don't have to worry about guys coming in or girls that are in their fleet vehicle that, are running out of gas and need the oil change every 3 months. I worked with with an intelligence agency that the biggest thing he enjoyed about it was they don't have to hunt these people down to bring their EVs back from the fleet to do an oil change. It's all just, streamline that maintenance cost and headaches that these fleet managers have. So I think that's a really, really big thing. And then just the technology is just, to me, is second to none with these EVs. So that was a mouthful on that slide, but Kayla, Christy, if you want to add anything, please do.
Well, you mentioned that you work with the federal fleet, and I know that you talked a little bit about the executive order. So kind of tell us about the federal fleet and how things are going with that process and the shift to electrification on the federal fleet.
Great question. And then I don't know if I'm on the right screen for the slide to move. I don't want to mess it up. So, okay, there we go. Great question. So 2021, the executive order was put in place, 14057. It requires all light duty fleet new purchases by 2027 to be alternative fuel. They want the entire fleet, light duty fleet, to be electrified by 2035. DOD has a goal of 2035 as well. And then the tactical vehicles, there's actually some numbers around 2050 for tactical vehicles being electrified and things like that. So there's very lofty goals. I think there's two challenges the government's going through right now. One is, chicken or egg theory. We've got to get the infrastructure to have the EVs. But some are very overwhelmed with getting the infrastructure in place, and we work with them on a daily basis to make them feel more comfortable that it's a big effort, but it's not as big as you think. And you want to start thinking about integrating solar and microgrids and doing really cool stuff to to limit the effects on the grid and keep it more resilient. So they're really comfortable with it once we start digging in with them. And then just the availability of the vehicles. So GSA has several vehicles available, but there's just a long waiting list. And then, you know, the chicken egg and the vehicle availability kind of comes together at one, because what's happening is all of a sudden Ford will have a couple of hundred Lightnings that they're ready to deliver that maybe weren't going to come in 2 or 3 months. So now it's, hey, federal agency A, we've got a couple hundred vehicles for you. We don't have infrastructure. We've got to figure this out. So there are products that you can deploy that don't touch the grid, that can be deployed in just a matter of a couple of months, and we'll get into some of those and later on. But it's they're moving quickly toward these numbers, and it's really impressive to see. There's a lot of focus. There are agencies, and I like to call them. I typically don't call out agencies by name, but in this case, I really like to. Department of Homeland Security is a team I work really closely with. If you're a state or local, a municipality or another federal agency, or even a commercial entity for that standpoint, they're a good group to talk to and talk lessons learned, because they've deployed solar units, they've deployed fast chargers, level 2 chargers. They've got stations in Puerto Rico with FEMA. They've got stations at their federal law enforcement training center. I mean, it's just here in HQ, St. Elizabeth's campus in DC, they've just really thought this through, and they're really implementing this executive order to its fullest. I focus mostly, this executive order is all encompassing when you think of going green. I'm focused mostly on the EV side of it, but it's really impressive, the movement that they've had. And some of the other DoD agencies, I'm really impressed with what Army and Navy are doing. They're really thinking ahead, and they're thinking of it in stages. Let's get some solar, some stuff that can go in quickly to start, and then we're going to analyze and do site assessments for the next phase, so we can start thinking about when we need level 2, when we need level 3. And maximizing our budget. So as a taxpayer, I like to see that. They're not wasting money. They're really thinking this out. So I'm excited about the progress that's been made. Kayla, I don't know if there's anything more you want to add there.
No, I agree with everything you said. It's really amazing. Just watching the progress. We probably have between 5,000 and 6,000 ports installed at federal agencies across the U.S., and that number grows daily. So,
yeah, and it's interesting when you think about the impact on the environment. Just to go back to that, you look at that stat: 656,000 vehicles in the federal fleet. It's pretty massive. The Postal Service has made announcements that they're going to be going electric over a number of years. So you think of the massive effect that the federal fleet itself, and including the Postal Service, can have on that. We have these really cool stats within the ChargePoint portal that you can go in and you can actually see how many kilograms of greenhouse gas savings, but also if we planted this number of trees and let them grow for 10 years, that would be the effect that it would be on the environment. So it pulls together kind of stats behind the scenes and formulas that come up with these numbers. And it's just, when you look at the ChargePoint portal, I go in and I see probably about 3,000 or 4,000 charging ports, and you see those numbers and how it accumulates, and it's really pretty impressive. And this is a massive effect. And then when you start looking at the state and localities, and as Kayla will appreciate, the school buses, and how you can start getting into buses going vehicle to grid and helping to support the grid. And, and that doesn't even include all the other stuff that we have that we can make electric, whether it's farming equipment and, all kinds of, I talked to an Army guy the other day that he's going as deep as looking at the weed whackers and things like that, all the maintenance tools that can go electric, but then they're worried about that effect on the grid. So bringing in resiliency is going to be important to this, but they're doing a really good job.
Well, great. So, we've talked a lot about the benefits, but what are some things to take into consideration when it comes to starting at the very beginning with the EV infrastructure installation? What should people really consider and take into account?
Yeah, so from my standpoint, you look at site selection. I talk about concept to completion. It's really an important concept in all of this because installing charging stations it's a lot. You've got all kinds of planning and civil work and permitting and thinking about electrical. How much capacity do I have? Do I have enough here? So there's a few different notes on this slide that I think are important. First of all, knowing your fleet and your vehicles, passenger versus light duty versus heavy duty versus medium duty. What type of charging do they need? A lot of people think fast charging. I go to a gas station, I put the plug, I don't even know what to call it, hose in a gas scenario. Sidebar, I'm from a big Italian family. I'm the youngest of 6. My mom's 85. She's getting all into this stuff. And she asks me, how much is gas right now down there? And I just don't know. I have no idea what gas costs. I couldn't tell you even close from 7 years of driving electric. So it's actually kind of nice to have that. But that was a little sidebar. But the levels of charging, everyone seems to want the fastest. It's got to be fast. But they don't realize that the infrastructure to put fast charging in requires 480 volt 3-phase power rather than your 208 to 240 that you would typically plug a washer and dryer into. The fast charging is really unique. You need it in a few different areas. You've got the infrastructure funds, the NEVI funds that are going to the states and localities. They're trying to set up corridors. You're going to need fast charging. Families going to the beach and they want to be comfortable that they can stop and get a charge and know where those chargers are. And it's only going to take 5 or 10 minutes. People don't realize it takes almost that amount of time to fill a gas tank. It does take a few minutes. I always tell people my bladder can't outdo my range on my vehicle. It's if you have 300 or 400 miles of range, you're gonna top up. You're gonna start with a full battery and you'll just top off as you go. So you go in, you use the bathroom, look at a couple snacks, take 10 minutes and come out. That's the fast charging that's 150, 350, 500 kilowatts of power into the battery, which is equivalent to anywhere from a couple hundred miles of range all the way up to 2,000 miles of range per hour. That's how I always equate it. So it's really not the biggest need out there for a fleet because your fleet is going to typically be long dwell time. It's going to park overnight. You're going to drive it 20, 30, 50, 100 miles. You'll get that back in a level 2, 25 miles of range per hour to 50 miles of range per hour, depending on the output. You'll get that back in just a matter of a few hours, overnight. The problem comes into play when you maybe have a Ford Lightning and you drive it till it's completely empty and, it's going to take 12 or 13 hours to replenish that battery. But you're not necessarily driving that all in a day. So you want to do your daily replenishment. You just like your phone, you find an area that, your phone starts to get low on battery. You're just finding somewhere to plug it in. And even if you have 50% battery, well, I better just make sure I've got it topped off. So it's very similar to a phone. And then, that's why I say most of the fleet needs are level 2. They're in the government, they have pursuit vehicles that obviously need level 3 charging, federal law enforcement vehicles and things like that. So, when you look at police forces and that type of thing, and maybe you get into fire trucks and things that you're electrifying that are like that, buses, you have to start thinking about the fast charging. But level 2 is going to cover most of your needs. So you want to go into your planning understanding what those needs are. If I need mostly level 2, then I need to, make sure that I put mostly level 2 in, and it's going to save you a lot from an infrastructure standpoint. There's also a ton with networked and smart charging that can help you plan. So you may only have a certain capacity of electrical. You can take a smart charger and you can daisy chain those chargers out and manage the power to where you can have full power when a certain number of vehicles are plugged in. And then when you double that number of vehicles, it's just going to throttle the power up and down based on how many vehicles are plugged in and how much power is available at the site. So network charging is going to be critical for a lot of reasons, and we'll get into that as we go. But the assessments, that second bullet, I think that's super important. We work with a lot of companies that go out and do a site assessment, look at the power. Hey, you're better off putting a few stations here and a few stations there rather than one kind of depot. A lot of times people think they need to put it all in one place, but that can get pretty expensive because you need a really heavy lift in the power. Use the power disparately where it is throughout your site. I see that on military bases all the time. They want them all in one spot. So, and then obviously keep an eye toward the future. One of the good examples here is you've got level 2 charging at 7.2 kilowatts that most vehicles can accept. You've got level 2 power charging, AC charging at 19.2 kilowatts. There's only 1 or 2 vehicles that can accept that power. So you want to think about vehicles that are going to be in your fleet that will be able to accept more power in the future. So you want to use products that can grow, with your fleet as well, things like that. So you want to look toward the future as well. Kayla, I always give a lot of color around things, but if there's something you want to add, I don't want to discourage you from jumping in there.
Nope, you're all good on this one.
Awesome.
Well, so, I think moving on to the electric vehicle, the infrastructure use, do you think that there are mixed use applications for this infrastructure? In other words, who is the infrastructure for? Is it just for employees, or can it be for the public as well? Personal vehicles, fleet vehicles, who is this for?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. The government's starting to go this way too. You're putting infrastructure in for your fleet. They're using it at night, as we talked about. You're driving your vehicle the amount that you drive during a day, plug it in overnight. So these assets are just sitting there in the parking lot, begging for people to use them. And more of your employees are going to have EVs. So in the federal government, there's something called the FAST Act that allows them to use these stations if they just charge people to use them. So again, a network charging station is critical to this because you can control who uses them, when they use them, how long they can use them for. You can do overstay charges. So if you're just, hey, we want people to get their commute back, charged during the morning, and then leave at lunch and open it up for someone else. You can set the limit at 4 hours. And then on the 5th hour, you bump the cost up from, say, $1 an hour or 20 cents a kilowatt hour to some bigger number like $5 or $10 an hour. And EV drivers are going to, immediately when they see that cost go up, move their vehicle. If it's premium parking, you might have to get a little bit fancy to make sure that they do move, because they may just think, hey, it's cost of parking in that spot. But there are mechanisms in network charging that allow you to, when the car is done charging, you'll know the driver will get a ping and there's kind of a wait list or a queue behind them, and you can charge them a fee to stay or let them know someone's waiting. Please unplug your vehicle. It's done charging. You've got 15 minutes or we're going to charge you a fee, and then the next person can go on. But those employees, they're going to want to use these stations, especially when they see them there. And I get a lot of the naysayers will say, but we don't give away free gas. But again, it's a different type of fueling. Some people have condos. I actually do live in a condo and I can't charge at home. So I've got to get creative. I go to a Starbucks down the street. I'll work for a few hours, plug in, bonus that it's free. But it's something to consider, that not everyone has access to charging at home or fast charging for the public. It's just a really good, and as the workforce gets involved and we get different generations of the workforce coming in, and we want to actually attract talent, it's a way for us to keep talent, because the younger generations often, now they're going to get more into EVs, and that's going to be a perk and a benefit that we want to provide them. And governments can do that. And it's just a great way to mix the use. You've got your GOVs or your government owned vehicles. You've got your POVs, your personally owned vehicles, mixed on the same stations. You're not putting in infrastructure separately for them. So you're just charging them to use it. And if you're a company or someone that can give it away for free, even better. It's a perk to the employee. So that's the type of thing you want to think about, is mixing the use. But it's something I think that's going to become more and more important.
Absolutely. What are some ways to make the vehicle charging more optimal?
Yeah, this is really the Apollo SunGuard wheelhouse. So Apollo SunGuard is a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. They are the premier partner. There's a couple of other federal partners with ChargePoint, but they've had 3 blanket purchase agreements that they competed for and won, dating back to 2014. They've been doing this for over 10 years as a value-added reseller to ChargePoint. The people in the federal government know them really well. They have that capability to sell state and local through GSA. They've got the veteran status, so that's often very, very beneficial. They're based in Sarasota. So the vision of Kevin Connolly, who is the president there, was, and he's ex-Army, lots of really good stories. His vision was, let me get into reselling the ChargePoint products, because if we shade them with our core product, which is our shade structures that we put in at parks and schools, and and custom shade that looks really nice. And if you go to their website, you'll see lots of really cool views of that. But if we shade the vehicle, they worked with a group called Ecotality. Ecotality is no longer around, but Ecotality did a study that they showed that the temperature in the vehicle was actually almost 100 degrees less under a shade structure as it's charging, or if it's sitting in a free parking lot, that's fine too. We're comparing it to charging. And then, the numbers were something, I can't remember the numbers. I think they list it 2 kilowatts per charging event. So when you really think about the fact that we want to really reduce, greenhouse gas and all of that, and we don't want to waste energy, when you're parking in an open lot, and if you drive an EV or you've seen cars charging, 90% of the time, if it's not in a garage, it's free and open in the elements. So you've got rain, you've got that to deal with, but you've also got the heat, and they're based in Sarasota, so they know sun well. And when you shade these stations, it just makes it more efficient. So when you're sitting in your car and it's charging, even if for 15 minutes in a fast charger, it's burning extra energy to power up the AC unit, keep the temperature in the cabin down and things like that. And even if you leave your car there's often overheat protections that turn that AC on when it gets above 105 degrees, 110 degrees. So it's going to burn extra energy. Kevin often talks about, the effects of trees. I'm trying to think of the terminology, but when you pair shade structure and grow trees, and then the trees grow over time, then that starts to bring the natural shade, and the shade structure gives you a pathway to have those trees give that shade. I will think of that term at some point. It's escaping me at the moment, but that was Apollo's vision, was let's shade these stations, make them more efficient, protect them from the elements a little bit. They are permeable, so water can trickle through it all plays together with the UV protection and such. But it does protect from the elements. It saves energy. So we're hopefully going to be doing some studies here in the near future with EPA, and working with a couple of charging stations related to that, and hopefully get an update on the study. But I think that's an important piece here. Shelby, I don't know if you're there and you want to introduce yourself, but we didn't get to you at the beginning.
I'm here. My name is Shelby Wright. Some of you may already know me. I've been with Apollo since February. I took over the EV department in March. And I just kind of look forward to working with everybody. And if you ever have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Shelby. Yeah, so I wanted Shelby to get her name out there because she's done a really good job on we're at the end of the federal year right now, so there's lots going on from a federal perspective. And again, our core focus is federal, but we do a lot of state and local work, and they can really work with any entity. So, and this is really, we're focusing on ChargePoint, but really the idea here is that ChargePoint Apollo kind of 1-2 punch with the shade structures along with EV charging and that type of thing. So Thanks, Christy. Sorry, I went a little further on that one too.
That's okay. We've talked about the benefits of EVs. We've talked about the considerations to take when you're planning for the infrastructure. But the big question is, how do you get started?
Right. And I'm looking at the slide that's actually shown, and it's got what I was trying to bring to my brain, which was the urban heat island effect. So if you Google the urban heat island effect, or you look at Apollo's website, it talks about the trees and growth and that type of thing. So from a getting started standpoint, which I think is the next slide, I think the key here is, with Apollo and what the way ChargePoint has approached this is, let's aggregate buying power and keep this a narrow pathway and make it easy for procurement. So if you're a local entity, you can use GSA. The federal entities there is a blanket purchase agreement in place that Apollo is an awardee on. So the idea here is to, they've already pre-competed this. The pricing has been vetted. There's certain percentages off. They've got packages that are unique to the government. It's just a really good setup. And then GSA always is great at helping, secure supply chains. They'll give us, numbers and estimates so we can build our supply chain off of that a little bit better. And then just, addressing, getting started with, okay, what hardware do I, and this is kind of that last bullet, what hardware do I need? Again, level 2, level 3, where do I go? And then from a software standpoint, network charging is super important. We live that to the nth degree. You want to be able to have uptime on these stations. So if the station is down, the only way to really have a vision into it is through this cellular connection that we establish. We try not to touch networks and things like that. So the software is a critical piece to this because it's going to help you maintain and manage these stations. ChargePoint is actually going through a FedRAMP certification by way of the BPA that Apollo is the awardee on. And that FedRAMP certification is going to be that final checkbox to any cybersecurity group. They just check the box and no worries, because FedRAMP is a streamlined process to evaluate and assess everything. So all the business applications that ChargePoint's using, how it connects, how it stores data, how they encrypt data, all of that good stuff is all covered under FedRAMP. And we're going to be done with FedRAMP in probably about a month and a half. We're in process on the federal FedRAMP marketplace for our software. It's a huge step. And then states, we're going to be dealing with state ramp. I don't know if that's a thing anymore, but they're going to be following the guidelines of FedRAMP. So it's going to be really important from a state and local perspective, because obviously energy resiliency, we see grids being hacked and things like that. We want to make sure that they can't get to the grid through the charging stations, or get to the vehicles through the charging stations, or disable a fleet because they can, disable all these stations remotely and things. But the software is critical to keeping your fleet running efficiently. Plus the ability to pull reports, see how much energy is being outputted, the greenhouse gas savings, seeing, being able to log and audit all the charging sessions, being able to attach your WEX card, which ChargePoint's the only company that has a true WEX integration, where fleet managers can use their WEX card through the software, through their ChargePoint cards, to pay for a session offsite or to manage and report on those sessions internally. There's all kinds of APIs that go with the software to open this up to, to telematics, to tying to building management systems, to bringing all of this energy data together. It's a really, really important piece to the full picture. So getting started is, I went into the software more than anything because I hadn't touched on that, but making sure the contracts are in place that you can leverage, but also starting to think about your infrastructure, your needs of your infrastructure, making sure it's networked so you can keep the uptime and you can keep those stations running efficiently and reporting on them. And then obviously thinking about the installation. And I actually have a few slides. I'm not sure if I'm able to share, but this might be a good time. Christy, do you mind if I just show a couple of those slides from that presentation that I...
Yeah, I think we've got a little bit of extra time. That would be fine.
great. Let's try this out. Can you see it? Do you see it?
Yes, I see it.
Okay, good. So I'm just going to touch on these creative solutions. We've just got one more slide after this, so I think we're good, and then we'll go into Q&A. And Kayla, I'm always taking over the conversation, so just interrupt me if you need to.
Yeah.
I've been doing this too long, in a good way. So from a creative solutions standpoint, you know, and Christy, this goes into your getting started. There's so many different ways you can think about, and some of these are renderings, some of these are, you know, are real life types of scenarios, but there are a lot of different ways to, you know, to accomplish what you're trying to do. Sometimes you just, you want some battery backup. Sometimes, you know, make it more resilient. Sometimes you want just a really quick way to get these stations on the ground, you know, because again, hey, we have 200 vehicles for you to accept in the next month. Do you want them, you know, do you want them or no? Well, of course we want them, but we don't have the infrastructure. So there's things like a K-rail. So it's, you know, sort of like a construction type of barrier that you can mount the stations on. You can pair it with batteries. So you'll see some batteries over there, and you can do it to a panel. All kinds of different creative ways from that standpoint. You can put them into shipping containers. So we can put, you know, these are some gantry style stations or wall type mounted stations that we can put in. You can even put a battery in that shipping container. You can add solar to that top of that shipping container. All of it resides as the infrastructure. So you've got the charging station that manages the on and off of the station and the charging sessions. And then you've got the infrastructure piece, which these are those solutions to that. So in all of these cases, you're just essentially mounting ChargePoint hardware or EVSE onto these solutions. Another thing that ChargePoint's really been keen on is the e-skid, or the skid mount, we should call it now.
Hey, Matt.
The skid mount, yes.
Hey, apologies, but we're seeing the Beam website right now, so I want to make sure you're showing what you're trying to show.
I'm so sorry. I guess not. Oh shoot! And I lost the screen. Oh shoot! Let me escape out of here. Yeah, I guess I'm not sure. I shared my whole screen. Do you see this presentation now?
We're still seeing the Beam website, but I'm not sure if you want to try again, or if somebody has interest in it, they can always let us know. And then if you'd like to email to them what you were trying to show us.
I'll try one last time, and I don't want to cause issues there. How about now?
There you go. There you go.
Got it. Okay. Thanks, Kayla. You know, the wonders of post-COVID, trying to do all of this stuff. So do you see the EVSE solutions now?
Yep.
Okay, good. So sorry about that. Thank you and Beam is the next page. So you'll see how we have a partnership between Apollo, ChargePoint, and Beam for their EV ARC product. But I talked about the K-rails. You heard me babble on about that. Here's the shipping container. So you've got a style where you can load these stations into the shipping container, add battery, add solar. Then you've got the skid mount. So the skid mount is a fast charging capability. We've got other skid mounts that are coming out that are single station. We can do it with level 2 stations. The idea to start was, you know, you don't want to dig and trench and do all of that work. So we provided a panel on the skid mount along with 2 fast chargers that can output at 125 kilowatts to a vehicle. And you can move the skid. They're very heavy, but you can move it with a forklift, place it next to a wall that has, you know, your connection to the grid, and have a temporary connection. And then if you want to move it where it's a leased facility or something like that, you can move it to another area. So that skid mount's a really cool solution. Then you've got the gantry solution, which has, you know, up on the top above, maybe it's an overhang or it's solar or whatever it may be, very, very important with buses that you have overhead charging. So just another way to deploy. And I'm looking, I'll spend just another minute here, but we also partner with a company called Beam Global, where VA bought a whole batch of these. The Army is deploying 300 or 400 of these. DHS is deploying, almost 100 of these, and they fit into a parking spot. And you'll see on the next slide, and they actually can be folded down. They've got this battery that's 43 kilowatt hours to provide the power to the vehicle. And then it's got an emergency power panel that you can actually pull from that power in an emergency case. And this can actually be folded down into a small footprint. This ballast is about 50% of the weight, and they can withstand 160 mile an hour winds. And they are not, they're not tethered to the ground in any way. They're just freestanding. So they're very, very substantial. And the Marine Corps put some in place. And this is just a view of the Marine Corps base. I won't name the base, but you can see the charge point station mounted on it. This is not tethered to the ground. It's just in that parking space. This solar PV will track the sun throughout the day, provide power to the battery. And depending on cloudiness and things like that, it will either power the vehicle through the battery or straight from solar, obviously at night through the battery. We all know, you can get sunburn even in cloudy weather. So there's still power produced. So depending on where it is, and you can also, connect 110 power to this unit to trickle power into it on a temporary basis. If, we've got units that are going to Alaska and areas like that, are dark all the time. So you can have some flexibility there. This is just a real quick slide that shows some pretty cool installs. So, you've got overhead conduit here, and then you come up through this surface conduit. You've got the EV arc. This is the Golden Gate Bridge and a really cool NOAA animal, or it's like a fishery location. And you see the charge point station there, and then, multiple stations across a parking lot. And then again, another overhead, solution that, that's in a federal agency. So I just thought that was cool to see, and just showing the flexibility of I'm trying to unshare, stop sharing. Okay, so there we go. I did that on the fly, so thanks for bearing with me on that. But the idea there is, when you're getting started, there's a lot of ways to do this. Don't feel like, oh, we just don't have enough power. Think about the full picture, integrating batteries, having creative ways to install the stations. So thanks for bearing with me on that.
Yeah, of course. That was very insightful. So let's go ahead and move to questions that we received from the audience. One of the first ones that we had was, there's a common belief among fleet managers who have not delved into electrification yet that charging infrastructure is very expensive. Do you believe that that is still true in 2023? And what other costs are associated with the infrastructure beyond the product itself?
Kayla, do you want to touch on that and then I can add, or I don't want to? I'm happy either way.
Go ahead, Matt. I was actually looking at the questions.
Oh, good. No, it's even better because you can get ahead of them.
Yep.
So cost, it depends. In all honesty, it's all about the planning and figuring it out. And I think the cost aspect of it is know your fleet. Like we said that on one of the slides early on. Know your fleet. If your fleet is, I had a scenario with a federal agency I will not name, but they had plug-in hybrids, but they thought fast charging is the only way to go. They put in 4 fast chargers and their plug-in hybrids couldn't use them. We had, throughout the process, talked about the fact that level 2 is for plug-in hybrids, and you want to have maybe just enhance your capabilities with fast chargers. But, it's just one of those things where you've got to think about the full picture. Do your vehicles need fast charging? Because fast charging is that gets really expensive. Or is it a level 2 scenario where I want to trench 200 feet because I want the stations over there? They have to be over in this corner of the parking lot. That civil work and the permitting and the construction, that can get massive. So you want to make sure you do these site assessments to be close to the power, make sure you have the right level of charging. If you have 480 volt power already there, fast charger might be the way to go. You just pay more expenses on the hardware and that type of thing. And you don't have to step it down to 208 power and do all kinds of work that way. But again, what areas of the parking lot do I need the stations? Do I need to have them all in one big hub that can get really expensive, or can I make them disparate throughout? And then solutions that if you do want to trench far, take an EV ARC or something solar or a skid mount or a K rail and put it somewhere in the parking lot where you can tie it to battery storage, or place it in a parking spot like an EV ARC. And you take away, although the product might be more expensive up front, you take away all the planning, permitting, you don't even have an electric bill in that scenario. So you want to fit the type of product with your needs. And, we work with lots of national parks. Do you want to avoid digging up your land and that type of thing? Because the digging and trenching and the civil work is what can get really expensive, and it can add up fast. Or adding power. We need to add a whole transformer and add panels and so that's where you want to think of from the beginning stages, what we want to do and what we want to accomplish and how can we avoid astronomical costs. So yes, it can get expensive, but you can mitigate that significantly if you think ahead and creatively.
Great. So can you, and one of the questions that we received was, can you connect solar panels on a canopy to the chargers without battery storage?
Say that one more time.
Can you connect solar panels to a canopy can you connect solar panels on a canopy to the chargers without battery storage?
Yes. Yes. So that is something that Apollo has been looking to pilot. So actually, if someone is interested in piloting something like that, they're looking at integrating solar into their shade structures and then having that direct connection to the vehicle. There are inverters and different pieces. It's not as direct, and I'm not an engineer, so I can't talk in great depth of that, but you don't necessarily need the battery storage to make it work. The battery storage makes it much more efficient, and I would highly recommend that you have some type of battery in the, as the go-between, because if it is cloudy and things like that, charging directly from solar, there's a lot of challenges around that. So that battery is important to keep the consistency. And even in, states like Arizona and Florida, and, it does get cloudy there occasionally, or, you just need that backup. So it can be done, but you want to think through that a little bit.
So I know you touched on a little bit about the mixed use cases, but can you go a little bit more into some of the pros and cons of employees using the government infrastructure for their personal vehicles?
So, I'm sorry, I'm following the question. I'm trying to think through it. So repeat the question again. I missed the beginning part.
What are your thoughts on employees using the government infrastructure for their personal vehicles?
Okay, so that's a pretty straightforward question. I personally think it's great. I think it's a really good way to approach it. It's goodwill to your employees. It's you're already putting the infrastructure in for the GOVs and the government-owned vehicles or company-owned vehicles. So you're not buying that infrastructure for those employees. And if you use a network charger like ChargePoint, you can get that money back. With the government, you want to be revenue neutral. You don't want to make money off of it. So in commercial entities, they're going to put those chargers out there so you can go in and buy snacks at their store or have a coffee or, go have food at a restaurant or a movie or something like that. So you're getting these ancillary benefits, but you're not giving up anything, in my opinion. So let's say you charge them 20 cents a kilowatt hour and your power is 12 cents a kilowatt hour. ChargePoint typically keeps a little bit of a fee because the person is going to use their ChargePoint card to have the transaction. So they load up their card with a certain amount of money and it auto replenishes, kind of like an Easy Pass. And ChargePoint's handling all those transactions and sending that chunk of money back to the station owner. So ChargePoint will collect it on the behalf based on the policy that's in place. They don't necessarily make money on those charges. They just assess the fee for credit card fees and such and send it back. So truly, and I'm sure there's people out there that could challenge this thought, in different manners, but theoretically, you're not really losing anything. You're just allowing them to use these stations when they're not in use by your fleet. So I think it's a great thing. Again, me being an EV driver that lives in a condo, I think it's if I did work in an office and not from home, I would certainly want to work somewhere where there was and I'd be happy to pay for it.
Absolutely. So another question that we got, I believe we may have time for one or two more questions, was what sort of solutions do you see for rental car facilities where the cars are turned around to another renter within 15 minutes? So particularly for airports or urban environments where there may not be a large amount of space for the charging and parking.
Good question. And Kayla, you may want to add to this. That's not my wheelhouse from a rental car world. Obviously, we see in the news Hertz and other companies going this route. Obviously, if you don't have space for chargers, that's a challenge. But typically when they come out, they're coming in stages. And the fast charging is going to be critical to that. So, like with ChargePoint, they have something called the Express Plus, which you can take up to even a megawatt of power. And they reside in these power blocks that don't actually take up a huge footprint, kind of like a supercharger. When you see Tesla, the power is kind of displaced. So ultimately, you're going to need something the space of like a supercharger. But you use that Express Plus model and you get a certain number of power links and you have all kinds of power modules. And it's going to throttle power based, up and down based on state of charge, how much capacity the battery is, how much power the vehicle can accept, and all of that good stuff. So the interesting thing when you mention airports is when you look at long-term parking, charging is great for long-term parking. And you can throttle power down to, almost just a trickle charge if people are gone for a few days. So with airports related to passengers and things, it's a great fit. With the rental vehicles, it's still a good fit. It's not my wheelhouse, so I don't want to dig into it too deep. But you would just more than likely want to have fast charging, infrastructure. But to me, again, you would have a number of fast chargers, but you'd have the level 2s. You obviously have parking spot for each car. So you've at least got that spot. So even if there's limited room, if each spot has a level 2 and you charge it overnight, or for a few hours to replenish, you're good. And then if you have, if you need to enhance that with some fast chargers that you can turn cars on, plug and unplug cars on a rolling basis, you can do that.
And one thing to add to that, Matt, I'm not on the rental car side of the ChargePoint team either, but our fleet team, we do have somebody that's dedicated to rental spaces. But one thing to keep in mind also is I see a lot of the skid-mounted DC fast chargers, the CP250s, just because, you may be at a certain location at an airport and the next day, I don't know, they may move you or whatever, or you need to, reorganize the parking lot or things like that. So a lot of those temporary solutions that Matt shared earlier, we see a lot of that on the rental car side rather than, installing full infrastructure for permanent sites. So.
Awesome.
Great. Well, that's all the time that we have today. Matt, did you have any closing thoughts you wanted to add before we close out?
No, I hope people enjoyed it. There's a lot of variables here. Just know that, the best thing to do is find someone that's an expert in this and have them help you through from designing these things to implementing them and the ongoing maintenance. And Apollo has been a really, really great partner to ChargePoint. So, reach out to Shelby, reach out to Apollo, reach out to Kayla and I, and we're happy to help groups through these processes. You've got friends in it, that have experience. So don't feel overwhelmed. And I hope this helped. It's a big subject.
Yeah, this has been great. I've had some of my own questions answered. So thank you again. And for anybody who had a question that we didn't get a chance to answer, we will be following up via email to answer your questions individually. So we hope you enjoy today's webinar. So I want to again thank Matt, Kayla, Shelby, ChargePoint, and Apollo SunGuard for the presentation. And I also wanted to mention that this webinar will be available on demand on the Government Fleet website at governmentfleet.com/webinars. So thank you again and have a great day.